Proceedings are resumed. Please be seated. The Honorable Premier continuing on the defense bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that indulgence and for the little Subway sandwich. I feel fortified and able to wind up this matter. Mr. Speaker, I won't be much longer, but I wanted to apprise members in advance of the committee stage of the bill of the other concessions that we are able to make based on, many of them based on the submissions that have come from the other side. Mr. Speaker, we are proposing to swap clause 5.1b with clause 5.1c, and I'll come to what that means in a moment, and include a provision for clause 5.1c and to include the words after consultation with the Premier. Mr. Speaker, clause 5 deals with the duties of the regiment, and it currently reads, the regiment is responsible for A, the defense of the islands, B, providing humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, C, assisting the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service and the Coast Guard when called upon to do so by the Governor, and D, such other duties as the Governor determines. There was concern raised by a number of members, in particular the member from North Side, about such other duties as the Governor determines. His concern was that was so broad and left so much to the discretion of the Governor that he thought it was unsafe to leave it unqualified. And so, Mr. Speaker, after consultation with the Governor's and the Governor's office, what we are proposing to do is, with respect to 5.1a and C, which are the defense of the islands and assisting the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service and the Coast Guard when called upon by the Governor. Those two areas are squarely within defense and therefore within Section 55(1) of the Constitution, which are the special responsibilities of the Governor. But the provision of humanitarian assistance and disaster relief and such other duties as the Governor determines are not. And so, with respect to providing humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, we are proposing to include the words after consultation with the Premier and also to do the same with such other duties as the Governor determines. That way the Premier will have some involvement, although not decision-making, in respect of the deployment of the regiment for those particular purposes. Mr. Speaker, we're proposing to amend Clause 7, which reads, in the exercise of the Governor's powers and duties under this law and any other enactment relating to matters of defense, including armed forces, the Governor shall act in the Governor's discretion. To provide, Mr. Speaker, that clause begins, except as is otherwise expressly provided. Because, Mr. Speaker, we have made a number of qualifications to the exercise of the Governor's discretion as I've gone through, and so that we want to make sure that doesn't conflict with that. So it says except as otherwise expressly provided. So where we have We have gotten the concessions for consultation or actual involvement in decision-making by the Premier, or in one case of the Leader of the Opposition. We want to make sure that this doesn't conflict, this clause doesn't conflict with those others. Mr. Speaker, with respect to, there was some concern expressed also about the provisions relating to the grounds for discharge, and in particular clause 26.5, which reads, the governor may grant permission to a member of the regiment to enter or enlist in any of Her Majesty's armed forces, notwithstanding that the regiment or the subunit of the regiment of which the person is a member is embodied. We are proposing to include, to change that, to amend that to say the governor, after consultation with Premier, may grant permission. Again, to have some more involvement of the Premier in the decision-making with respect to the regiment. And Mr. Speaker, finally, clause 31, which reads, which is about the period of embodiment of the regiment. The period of embodiment of the regiment or part of the regiment shall be of such duration as the governor may determine, and shall not terminate until the governor orders that the regiment or part of the regiment shall cease to be embodied. We are proposing to amend that to say the period of embodiment of the regiment shall be of such duration as the governor, after consultation with the Premier, may determine. Yes. That way, at least the period of the embodiment has to be consulted on. Yeah. Yeah, but the Premier will have some input into that. Right. So, Mr. Speaker, that I think rounds out the number of changes which are significant that we are posing to make. There may be some others that we can entertain during the committee stage if compelling arguments are made and the Constitution allows, and we can get the governor's agreement if there are in any way incursions on his powers as set out in the Constitution. So, Mr. Speaker, again, I want to thank all members for their contributions, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. But, Mr. Speaker, without question, and I say this, I mean, sometimes we in particular may say things for a moment, or for a light moment, because this thing can get very tense. But I say this bit very, very seriously. I think what we have seen occur over the course of these past two days with respect to this bill is probably one of the most beautiful parts of that thing called democracy, in my eyes, because it has allowed every member of this House to really scrutinize and criticize a bill, not just for the sake of doing so, but they have actually achieved a significant result. I cannot claim that every issue that has been raised by members on the other side we have been able to address perhaps to their satisfaction, but I would believe that we have gone a long way, perhaps as far as 80% of the issues that have been raised. We have been able to offer some concession, some amendment, and I do believe that the end result will be a much better law for these islands, and one that all of us in this House, I hope, will be able to support. And one, Mr. Speaker, the vote of this House would be a reassurance to members of the regiment who are currently enlisted, and an encouragement to those who are contemplating enlisting. This, Mr. Speaker, as I've said before, this bill and ultimately this law is another milestone, if it passes, in the continued development of these islands, in our growth as a increasingly mature democracy. It is, Mr. Speaker, a significant step in the long road of nation building. And I do believe that in time to come, those who come after us, not just in this house, but in this life, will look back on occasions like this and on legislation like this with pride, the same kind of pride that we demonstrate over and over in this house, in the foresight, the wisdom, and the courage of those who held these seats two generations ago. And so, Madam Speaker, I conclude by commending this bill to all honorable members and looking forward to their support.
Question is that a bill shortly entitled "A Bill for a Law to Provide for the Establishment of a Regiment for the Islands and for Incidental and Connected Purposes" be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, the ayes have it. The bill for a law to provide for the establishment of a regiment for the islands and for incidental and connected purposes has been given a second reading. I recognize the member for Georgetown West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to acknowledge two visitors in the gallery, and with your permission, I would just like to offer deepest condolences to Mr. Victor Crumley Jr., whose father, Mr. Victor Crumley Jr., Sr., passed away this morning. Yeah. So we just want to offer him our deepest condolences. And Vic, you're in our prayers. And you, Jan, and the whole family are in our prayers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank all honorable members of this House for their support of this important bill. I'm very grateful we've got to this point. I just want also to extend my personal condolences to Victor. I just spoke to him, didn't realize that had occurred. I am deeply sorry, my friend. Mr. Speaker, I move the adjournment of this Honorable House until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. It's private members' day, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I too would like to express on behalf of the opposition sincere condolences to Victor, who we all know very well. I didn't know that his father had passed myself. It's just news to me now. Thank you.
Question is that this Honorable Legislative Assembly do stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Thursday morning, 10 a.m. All in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This Honorable Legislative Assembly stands adjourned.